you can tell, today we're going to talk about dreams. Dreams, I love the subject because it's sort of where we're all full of shit when we try to explain them, you know? But I think it's amazing that man is made up of a bunch of stuff that man never asks questions about. Right? We all go to sleep. Now, some people don't dream. So I'm going to talk about the process of why we might have to go to sleep in the first place. And then the dream reward, hopefully if you're having good dreams, that it can occur once we go to sleep, right? Why does man have to sleep? You know, when I first asked myself that question, I was working on sort of a treatment for a film, and I just asked myself, why does man have to go to sleep? Why is that? You know, and the low-hanging fruit answer is, well, because you're tired. Okay, so I get in bed, and what really happens? Does my heart go to sleep? Nope. Do my organs stop working? Nope. In fact, if I eat a giant meal and drink a bunch of wine, my body's on overload just trying to process the food, which we know we get sleepy during the day when that happens. So, again, you may actually... There's a duality between your consciousness and your body. That's sort of what I want to talk about before we lead into dreaming itself. It's been a long time since I did my whiskey stick. This thing is like the Titanic of awesome cigars. My dad's best friend, who's a Vietnam vet, helicopter pilot, he was shot down like 5 times, survived every single time. Don't think he lost a single person due to his mechanical flying. In fact, he saved everyone's life because he was so good. A guy who'd basically been to hell and back, and he had figured out the value of life by doing this incredible thing. He was just a kid in Missouri. He enlists during Vietnam, gets sent over, does at least 3 tours. He said to me, he goes, sleeping is the single biggest waste of time that you will experience in your life. He tells me this when I'm probably anywhere between 11 and 13. And I had this tremendous respect for this guy because my father did as well. And does. We all do. Everyone's still alive. But it really racked my brain early in life to look at sleep in a completely different manner than seemingly everyone else around me, who just couldn't wait to get to bed. But it took about, I don't know, nearly 3 more decades for me to really ask the question, why do we have to sleep? You know? And if you do ask that question, I've got a friend of mine, my writing mentor. He doesn't like to talk about dreams, not because he's had any bad experiences, just because in terms of writing, you know, he's just like, people can't agree on this. So I guess for whatever reason, he thinks it's really muddy and he doesn't want to touch it. Or their stories get goofy or something like that. I'm not sure exactly the reason why. He's the one person I'd like to have the conversation with, and he doesn't want to have the conversation. But just as a layman, you know, I started looking at the problem and going, okay, why biologically is this occurring? Because I feel like my consciousness is its own thing, and my body is another thing. But depending on how my body is feeling, my consciousness has a good day or a bad day. Any one of you have been hungover. Hopefully this is the day after Thanksgiving. Hopefully everyone's feeling good. As long as your body's healthy, your mind's healthy, right? That's the whole thing, body and mind. And you absolutely have to take those words at face value. But think about it. When we go to sleep, we're only losing a fraction of a percent. Probably a little more than that. I'm being a little catchphrasy, but we're losing only a fraction of our 100% of second-to-second churning on the body. And yet when you lie down, don't you feel like your whole body needed that? You know, when your bed hits the mattress, you can deny yourself all day, you know, going to sleep because you got something exciting going on. And then as soon as you do lay down, in fact, the more you've stretched it out, man, as soon as your back hits your bed and hopefully you have a comfortable bed, oh my God, you just sink into it, right? There's this unbelievable, almost angelic hand that touches your body as soon as you hit that bed. It seems a little odd. It seems like it's sort of, it seems like it's above and beyond what we walk around with prior to sleeping. You know, like there's something added to us or something, some phase that happens to us when we try to go to sleep. Now, I was a kid that I probably slept instantaneously up until about the age of 9. Around the age of 9, I would go to bed and my brain would absolutely, it was almost like you just took a human mind and you just jacked it into the universe. You know, like this big plug outlet at the end of the head of my bed, my mind would just go click. And I could not stop having the most incredible epiphanies. It was like I was on acid constantly, and I was just constantly having these epiphanies, making connections to things that, I don't know why. I would think about what I want to draw, think about what I wanted to do story-wise or creatively or something like this. And this has gone on forever and ever. And it was somewhere in my 30s. And I don't know how this happened. I don't know how this happened at all. But at some point, I put a earplug in the ear that was up from the pillow, and suddenly I could sleep. And you might think, "Oh, that's really weird." I'm not saying it's not, but let's look at the science of what that is. I have extremely good hearing, like crazy good hearing, like annoying good hearing. And no, I don't hear the sky howling to me. Although I have been in my house one time and heard a really weird frequency that lasted about, 5 minutes. It was nauseating. It was weird. In fact, it was just a couple months ago. I only say that because one of our listeners is tracking the sky sounds, and I read through some of the stuff in Wikipedia, and they were saying some people only have it in their home, and some type of device frequency, like use of electricity or something that just hits your head and makes you have this weird feeling. But when I put an earplug in, what's actually occurring is that it's taking all the ambient noise that my brain hears, and it cuts it off. And it's all electricity, right? So if my ear is taking in a bunch of sound, it's translating into electricity. I assume my ear is actually consuming more electricity than it needs to actually register sound or something like that. So there's this overflow. There's either a short circuit or there's an overflow. The overflow would mean the spillage would go into maybe thoughts. The short circuit means something's connected that shouldn't be connected, and my brain actually uses sound to create thought. And that may be why I have a lot of good ideas when it's really loud in the room. Just kidding. But I always was a kid doing something, creating something constantly, reading something, writing something. And so for me, sleep was never something I really wanted to jump into, ever. If I could not sleep right now, I wouldn't sleep. And I have amazing dreams. Maybe I'd do it every once in a while just as a break, like a little vacation. In terms of productivity, I wouldn't do it. People ask me if I've done drugs in my lifetime. I'm like, not really. I mean, I did cocaine once. I put my finger on it, putting it on my mouth. Worst experience of my life. Weed, it just makes me silly and out of control. It makes me stoic. I don't like that. Acid's amazing. I've done it twice. You don't really need to do it more than a few times in your whole lifetime. So you'll just get it, But the one drug I took as a kid in my teens is I had a person close to me that was using it to supposedly lose weight, and it wasn't really working out, but I could get to this person's house and steal little what's called Black Widows, and it's speed. And I would take this stuff every once in a while, and then most of what I would do is stay up a single night, and so I would go 48 hours, and I barely could make it the 48-hour mark. I'd probably be about 40 hours, and I'd be asleep. Got some funny stories with that, which I'll share at a different time. But it's funny, my friends were doing drugs to party or whatever, and I was doing drugs so I could stay up all night and program and paint. I had a little Texas Instruments color computer. I believe mine was its extended version, and it was the 2. Because there's a 1, 2, and a 3. I've bought the 2 and the 3 in my later years. I got them in my garage. But it was this little computer, and that's what I used to get my stuff at the house done, right? My school had Apples and PCs. My cousin had an Apple. Anyway, but that was my drug story for all my friends, was that I was a nerd trying to stay up, not go to sleep. I know this is about dreaming, but I want to just lead into this by talking about sleep in general. Now, there's a great movie out there called Dark City. And it's about a floating city, flat earth city, with literally at the edges of this city, which you're not able to see. It's kind of blocked like a video game, where you try to go down the alleyway, but there's a bunch of dumpsters. You go to the next alleyway, and there's a car in the way, so you can't quite get to the perimeter of this place. What happens is these people, I highly recommend you see it, no matter what. They go to sleep at night, and at night, aliens who have a brainstem connection to this symbiotic being, remember what we're talking about with sort of your soul might be attaching to your body in the time travel episode. They attach, they have these kind of avatars, which is us, sort of humanistic bodies. They wear black coats with black hats, which is another rumor on the internet. The rumor is that people that control flat earth come in and look like human beings. There's even a video of these two thugs coming into a hotel. And there's a story of everyone who worked in the hotel saying these guys roughed us all up looking for somebody and then left. And they're massive bodies with these little tiny heads. And it's in surveillance cameras. You can watch this, right? I don't know how you looked it up. Maybe Men in Black. What would it be? Men in Black Hotel. I don't know. But it's interesting. So in the movie, at night, they do what's called tuning. And they're tuning all of the positions and places. This is part of a Twilight Zone that turned into Groundhog Day. So they took one of the elements from it that Groundhog Day failed to take, which was sort of pathetic because it was one of the greatest twists, which is as each day starts up, people are shuffled around. So one guy's the milkman one day, then he's the president, then he's the mayor, then he's a janitor, then he's a normal old 9-to-5 dad. And they keep mixing this up and tuning it because they're trying to distill out of mankind an essence of something that will help them save their race. And I forgot exactly the anomaly with their world. But then when everyone wakes up again, they don't remember what they were before, and they start their day. That seems impossible that someone would have a bunch of previous memories to think that they've done this. I think I've made a lot of episodes right here, so I'm pretty sure I've locked myself down here. But some of us have major deja vu from time to time. And that makes you feel like you've been there before. And so sometimes you feel like you've been there before, especially if chronology allows it. I had an artist work for my video game company, and she, when she was going to art school in the Art Academy in San Francisco, she had to live in one of these Victorian homes, in downtown. She rented a room. And she said as soon as she walked in, she got just an absolute deja vu. Not only where everything was in the place, all the rooms and the bathrooms and stuff. And imagine this, you get the deja vu of knowing what's in a particular building, and then you rent the room there. So every day you're waking up in this weird epiphany place, right? But I think her dream was that there was a husband, wife, and 2 kids, and the mother passed away somehow, weird. And so she sat there as a ghost guiding her children. And that was the turn of the century sort of story for this particular building. And so she drew it. And it was that portfolio of drawing those characters. Well, she drew it just like Walt Disney's best illustrators right out of school. And I looked at that. I said, you got the job. Here's a zombie. Draw this for me. And she came back and blew me away. Amazing. But the Dark City is interesting because what Dark City does for me personally is to force upon mankind a sleep pattern for another purpose. Now, of course, because the world's big, flat around, there's a bunch of people awake and there's a bunch of people asleep, and a lot of us stay up really late and some of us get up early. And so there's always someone awake. It's not like Dark City where you can just make a whole town go to sleep. But there's also probably not black coat people walking around programming us. But there's something mandatory about sleep. Creatures sleep, right? Insects sleep. Everything sleeps. And I will say that I worked at Walmart as a kid, and I remember there was this woman there, and she probably was about 5 foot. And she told me one day, softest spoken woman, I don't know how old she was, probably in her 60s. She said, yeah, I only sleep a couple hours a day. I was like, what? She goes, yeah, I only sleep a couple hours a day. I said, well, you're married, right? Oh, yeah. Oh, I said, what do you do for the rest of the night? Do you get up? What do you do? She goes, I just lay next to my husband while he sleeps. I was like, wow, that's brutal. Consequently, I had a massage therapist once when I was getting my neck worked on. And she used to massage me several times a week on my neck. And she said that she had about the same story, but she said she would wake up at that hour and see gray aliens in the room. And she said that they would take her. She's dead serious. She said, and she was pretty nonchalant about it too. They said they take her, and this is sort of one of the rumors about, if we have aliens who made us and take care of us, that the Greys are essentially the robots to go get us and stuff. But she said that they would take her into a school and teach her things. And, being the kind of kid I am, I was probably about 19, 20, somewhere in there. And I said, well, what do they teach you? And she's, oh, well, lots of things. But I said, well, okay, tell me one of the latest things they taught you. And then she said, well, they're trying to teach me to count in colors. I was like, what? She goes, well, there's an infinite number of colors. And she goes, well, they use colors to count. And so they're trying to get me to figure out how to count with them. But my eyes aren't good enough to do it, and my brain's not, dense enough to keep color shades into number digits and stuff. But she goes, it made complete sense. They would add two colors together and would have another color, and that was how they registered mathematical equations. And I was like, geez, you're pretty creative. If you're lying, you should go right, But she said that her husband actually also had been captured a couple times, and that they would essentially wake up in sleep paralysis, or it's where you wake up and you can't move your body, right? And they would both have it, and they would both that morning, when they finally got control of their bodies, would talk about their abduction experience. And I thought, I often forget about this woman, but she told me this tale, and it was pretty much a couple days worth of telling me that stuff, and I think I just let it go. I probably actually stopped going at that point, not because of the story, but just because I was done. Otherwise, I would have grilled this woman a lot more. Every single lighter I have is out. I had to use a match to light this thing. So, sleeping. That's the first door that is imposed on us, the first requirement to get to dreaming. Now, again, there's daydreaming, and I'll get to that as well. But I've been studying dreams for a long time, and I think, I've bought books that try to translate dreams. These books that say, well, if you fly, it's good luck. Oh, okay. It definitely feels amazing when you decide to fly. It's the second I have a lucid dream, I decide to fly almost immediately, depending on where I am. So let's put sleep on hold for 1 second. It is something that is imposed on you. I'm going to come back to it because I've studied the process of actually falling over the cusp of sleep. So when I'm going in for a sleep, I try to maintain my consciousness as much as possible, trying to see if there's this moment where I can just shift directly into a dream, and I've actually done it. I've actually was sleeping with my girlfriend, and I came up behind her, and I think I'd rolled over or something, and so we're spooning, as they say, and I was looking at her back, and I remember turning over, and I'm looking at her back, and I felt my whole consciousness, like it was a wall of this reality, just go, whoo, and just shift, and I was immediately in a dream. Just as lucid as falling into another room. So that's the only time I can record it in my memory of consciously realizing I just had entered a dream. It was wild. I can't remember if I was asleep already and I just rolled over, or if I was crawling into bed to begin with. I'm pretty sure I'd rolled over, but I was pretty sentient. I can still remember her back at this point in my mind. But okay, let's talk about dreams as man has defined them to man. Because they obviously have done a lot of research at Stanford and a bunch of other colleges where they wire up to EKGs and all kinds of apparatus, and they watch us dream. And they keep coming up with these sort of, for me, everything that they've ever said about dreaming is almost entirely inaccurate to my experience. And for those of you out there who are following, truth movements where you feel like you're being lied to, and of course, I have to be careful because there's just a general paranoia in the universe that's like that, because we don't have all the knowledge in the world. But for those of you who believe that there's something greater out there behind a subject, and the way that you've been taught it closes off your mind to it. You know, the guy who created Coral Castle, for instance, he said that the entire model of the atom that is being propagated into people's minds from the physicists like Einstein and what have you, he said that they're lying to you. What's in an atom is a photon. And he goes, everything that you think you're seeing is just a derivative of that photon interacting with the rest of the energy of the universe. And all you're doing is you're calling the velocities and intersections of ether off of a photon, electrons, neutrons, and protons. And I've done a lot of research after he said that, and I think he's completely correct. It makes complete sense. I wrote it all on paper and did diagrams and velocity checks, and it's like, yep, it could totally happen. You know, it's all energy, it's all the same stuff. But for dreams, they want to tell you the following. What do they say? We go to sleep, and we very quickly get into REM sleep, random eye movement, which is it's got to be the dumbest name for that. We saw him move his ass, so we can call it REM. But you go into REM sleep, and that's where you're supposedly having the visual dreams that you remember. And again, some people don't remember anything. Some people, according to them, have no dreams. I do find that the people that tell me that are often mouth breathers. And I mean that very specifically. They seem to be almost that species of human that, for whatever reason, can't keep their mouth shut during the day. They just sit there with their jaw open. It's really weird how those folks exist. There's something like not connecting. The consciousness and the body is not connecting enough to bring the jawbone up. It's a real species of human. It's not that prevalent, but they're out there, right? Next one up is deer eyes. You get your jaw shut, but you can't use your eyeballs, right? You're just like, I'm just experiencing life by following through it. By finding my smartest friends, those who really, think, they're always having dreams, constantly. But you're supposed to have this REM state, and then you're going down to this delta phase where you're actually just so utterly asleep. It's when you really start snoring, and it's not completely coupled, snoring and delta, but it's really where you go down deep, and your consciousness, as measured by instruments that measure electricity in the brain, say that you no longer dream. Touch up with matches. Crazy. But these two phases, and what they always tell you is that in a split second, you have all of your night's dreams. You can have an 8-hour dream in a split second. Now, I'm assuming that the reason why they believe that is they hooked a person up. They saw a really short burst in brain activity, lots of REM movement, and then they woke that person up eventually, or they woke up, and they said, what did you have? Oh, I had this huge adventure. Oh, okay, tell us about it. Well, it went on forever, and and hours went by, and I went here and here and here. And that's where they think you have these split-second dreams. Then there's people like me. And I've talked to lots of people like this. In fact, I don't have any friends who claim to have, fallen asleep. You drink a bunch of liquid or something, or booze or whatever, and you got to go to the bathroom, get up and pee, and they hit their bed, they're down for 5 minutes, and then they wake up and they've had an 8-hour dream. I am yet to meet a single human being that's ever claimed that to me. And that's what they're saying. And that's what they're saying happens every night for those of us who dream. But instead, my experience is real-time dreaming. Absolutely real-time. If I get a good engaging dream, I go in, I got my dream people with me, right? These people that are always unique, but I feel like I know them. If I dream about you, if I bring a real person into my dream, that means I really must be thinking about you, because it rarely ever happens, right? But I'll go in and spend an hour or 2 or 3, and it feels like an hour or 2 or 3, and I get up to go to the restroom, and I'm looking at clocks, and I go back to sleep, and sometimes I crawl right back in that dream, no problem. Spend another couple hours, it feels like a couple hours, and I get up, and the clock has moved a couple hours. So I'm having extremely real-time dreams when I dream. It's almost exhausting sometimes. I think that's one reason why I've never been a real morning person, because I'm exhausted. By the time I get up, I'm like, God, my body just doesn't rest. I'm just constantly having experiences. And morning people typically don't report intense dreams. And I've recently met someone who actually has super duper intense dreams and is a morning person, but she also gets to bed early too. So she gets a good stretch of it all. But what are dreams? What are dreams? Don't you think it's a little amazing that your mind has the ability to conceive of complete worlds that you've never experienced before, in most cases, within a dream construct, this dream paradigm, this place that we go? For those of you who daydream, let's bring daydreaming in, because it's sort of going to craft the dimension of possibility. We want to really know, are dreams infinite in possibility, or are they only able to recraft the boundaries of our current experiences? You know, like if we've never been to the moon, can you really dream of being on the moon? I find that aside from music that I can hear, I've had countless dreams where I'm either writing a song and singing a song in a dream, and it sounds phenomenal. The hook's there, everything's there. It's almost angelically perfect. Or I'm sort of flying around. I mean, last time I had a dream where I was writing music, I was actually in this, the big homes that have spiral, they have libraries, and they'll usually have like a study that leads up to sort of a spiral room that goes up to either a vaulted or like a dome ceiling or some type of skylight, and the books are all around the outer edge with obviously part of the circle gone so you could go in there. I was floating inside this almost Hogwarts looking, study, and I'm just sort of floating, and it's a beautiful kind of warm light, like the middle of the day or maybe the evening with a fireplace or something, and I'm just floating and I'm hearing this music. And so aside from that, my brain can seem to stitch together notes of instruments, and I can have a dream where I'm writing music, and I can actually wake up and totally write it down if I want to. My days of dreaming about being a rock star are long over, so I just let it go. But I can't, I should say this much. I haven't been able to have a dream where I hear something that I've never heard before. The audio that is contributed into my dreams seems to be, for me personally, limited to what I've ever heard before. It's very, I don't hear a scary sound or anything, not that I ever get scared, but, that I haven't heard before. You get it. I also seem to have a tough time seeing things that I've never seen before. My wish for my dream regiment would be to go to another planet and see something that's unearthly, but sort of sentient society living in a city. I want to see how they build cars or vehicles. I want to see what their bodies look like. I want to see their faces just as close as I possibly can, right? So I've had two experiences where I thought I was on another planet. One, I know I was not on Earth, and one that might have been Earth in the future. And, the one that I knew I wasn't on planet Earth was that I was flying over this organic terrain, and it was a bunch of gigantic trees made out of giant tubular sort of bamboo. And it was like all of them came together beautifully in uniform to make these giant trees. And when I'm talking about giant trees, these things were bigger than mountains, and they would go way up in the clouds. And I was underneath the cloud layer, and it was sort of a misty, cold kind of, you get this feeling that it was either, it was like maybe 60 degrees in this jungle or something, early morning mist, and it's just all these trees perfectly packed, but because they're so massive, as their trunks went up, they're really far apart. And so I was kind of flying down through this, and I think I was able to kind of hang on to one of the tubes, which was like, massive. I mean, it was just like maybe a city block in diameter, and there's, probably 4 or 5 dozen of these that make up one trunk. That was the only time I ever felt like I was on another planet. And it was crystal freaking clear, this particular dream. It was really weird. And the other one was set in a open field of green with kind of a lush trees around it and stuff. And the ground had been transformed into this beautiful sort of, I don't know if you've ever seen the pictures of colliders when they slam atoms together, and you have the subatomic particles spin off in these really cool patterns, and sometimes people turn that into artwork. The ground, it was kind of like that, and it was all electrified, and these vehicles were landing and plugging into some of the matrix on the ground to get recharged as they would kind of get automated away as the people left. But it was only me. I was the only one there. And there was this sort of futuristic gazebo thing, which was just utterly Sid Mead to the nines, this wild-looking sofa, where instead of having, sofa edges that come up for your armrest, they actually went down. How profound, right? I don't know. It was weird. I just remember walking around, and that was the other one that I really felt like I was someplace else. That was sort of the feeling I got that made me get off and remember the dream. But other than that, I dream about Earth constantly. I don't go anywhere else. Dream about this, being in this house, dream about being in all my grandfather's and grandfolks' homes and places I used to live. I'm always in gigantic skyscrapers, having parties or whatever. And so I wonder, why am I so limited in those dreams if it's not some sort of playground within the consciousness that I have? Why wouldn't I have esoteric dreams of, falling through colors or something bizarre, not being human, I did once have a dream that was sort of the total perspective vortex where I found myself floating in blackness. And it was sort of, the only thing I could see is sort of when you see, little fiber particles, floating in the air. That's all I could see. But it was utterly void in all directions. And it was the most disturbingly weird feeling. It wasn't like you're going to scream, but you almost felt like this silent scream of, oh my God, tell me this is not my reality. Tell me I'm not just stuck here doing nothing, right? I suppose if I had my mind, I'd have something to do. I'd be counting my fingers forever or something. But I feel like when we daydream, fantasize about something, we have this amazing ability to pull assets together in our brain by choice. And we see reality inside our heads, and we sort of have this amazing ability to craft something. You could imagine yourself being a millionaire or a rock star or traveling to Hawaii or the moon or wherever. You could imagine yourself in a Star Wars universe, a Fallout 4 universe, and if you play those video games or watch those movies, you'll typically have a dream that might actually bring those realities to you, So don't forget, we have that power. We have that power to do that. We can dream up stuff. We can force our brains to have images in our mind. And next time you go to sleep, some of you actually use this to go to sleep. Do this. You're tired. You lie in your bed. And we blow this off like crazy, and I think it's almost crazy that we do. And because we don't have a group conversation about dreams, like the whole world has never made talking about dreams a trend. It's never been a beatnik subject in the late 50s where they said, man, wait, this is the era where we totally crack dreams, man. Nope, never done it. I mean, maybe back in Plato's day, they got into it. But when you go to sleep, before you nod off, if you can keep yourself awake for 60 seconds or 5 minutes. For those of you insomniacs, you're going to love this exercise. When you daydream or fantasize, this is you pushing things into your mind. When you write stories, you push the characters and the sets in your mind, and you sort of watch them do what they do. And man, if you've ever written for any length of time and you have your characters disobey you and just go off and do things that are far more interesting than you would have ever done, then you start going, holy crap, what is the universe? What is consciousness, right? Because the same mechanism of me sitting at my computer writing a story and going to sleep at night, I think it's the same mechanism. But we don't talk about it. How come we don't talk about it? Isn't this what we do every single night? Isn't this what is imposed on our biology or our psychology? Why aren't we talking about this? Isn't it cool? Isn't it amazing? All right. When you go to sleep tonight, when you lay down, I want you to notice something. As soon as you close your eyes, notice that in the distance of your closed eye vantage point, there are little swirls of stories going on in front of you. And they're almost there for a few seconds, and then they're gone. But realize that that is in front of you when you close your eyes at night. It's really there, and you can just observe like a split second of maybe your past. Oh, it's my dad and I back when I was 7. Oh, that's when I was in high school and split my head open. But then you'll also just be watching scenes. You're not in them. You're seeing a car drive by. You're seeing a rocket launch. Whatever is interesting to you, whatever you just happen to be ambiently picking up, we have these visions that we constantly have. What would cause that? Again, we're not having the conversation, so let's just take it one step further. What would cause that to be the case? You're relaxing your mind, and all this stuff's filtering down into you. Now, again, if it was really relevant to your life in your past, you might just say, well, I'm just going through some more long-term memories, and it's just creating a collage of whatever. Hey, that's still pretty amazing if you're seeing things from a camera viewpoint that you have never actually seen them from. You know, we tend to look at this reality right here, and we say, hey, you know, there has to be a God because something's holding this whole thing together. And maybe God is nothing more than the mathematics that do hold everything together, right? But whatever it is, you're totally plugged into it, and you can see it every single night when you go to bed. And again, I think even if you're a non-dreamer, or you don't remember your dreams, you still probably have that thing I just told you about where you close your eyes and you can see things. If you're a non-dreamer, practice seeing things in your mind in terms of a daydream or a fantasy of something. You know, a fantasy is nothing more than a daydream with a very specific charter, right? Now, what are some of the popular beliefs of dreaming in the scientific community? One of the most recent ones is that it's where you file away your memories of the day. Well, that seems a little bit weird. We know that short-term memory is about a 10-minute loop, and as long as you survive 10 minutes, whatever happened to you right now 10 minutes ago goes into your long-term memory forever. And there's a very regimented chemical experience when you recall a long-term memory. It gets this definitely happened sort of thing. And hopefully you've used your frontal lobes to determine whether it's true, false, or you're still evaluating it. I'm going to get a lighter, though, filled up here. Now, when you're awake, what you think about is, I'm awake, I got to do my thing. Got to go to work. Got to get my destiny. Got to do whatever you think life is all about, right? And that's why I always encourage everyone to have the answer ready when someone asks you what's your purpose in life. Because if you don't have that well-defined and meaningful to you, then what you end up doing all day is pretty damn boring. And it starts to make your deathbed look like a regret. So definitely figure out what you're doing. But what if I said to you, dreaming is the other place that you go that could have just as much purpose as this life? Far less burdenous, because it is a fantasy world where you can control things. Some of the most brilliant minds in the video game business have worked very, very hard to always have lucid dreams. And there are some pretty easy techniques you can do to get yourself to have lucid dreams. It just depends on if you want them. I used to think I really wanted lucid dreams, and I ended up kind of thinking, well, I kind of like the organic nature of dreams when they're not lucid. Right? So let me just share with you some of the cooler techniques I've heard. In fact, I'll just give you one awesome technique. When you dream and you read something and then you reread it, it scrambles. It's a very interesting telltale genetic of what dreams are really made out of and how much we actually have control of them. So if you see a sign up on the wall and it said Walmart, and then you look away and you look back at it, it won't say Walmart again. It'll say something else. It might even say something garbly goopy with the same letter structures as whatever alphabet you read. But it scrambles. Because of that reality, if you build up a habit of reading things in awake life, when you know you're conscious, I guess this is the preferred consciousness, right? You read something, and then look away and read it again. And create that habit of rereading things and realizing that they lock in place when you're awake and they scramble when you're asleep. if you make a habit of reading things and rereading them specifically to test yourself as to whether or not you're dreaming or not, you'll be able to catch whether or not you're in a dream. It's very interesting. And at that point, you can do whatever you need to do. Now let's talk about nightmares for 1 second. Nightmares are always relative, right? Nightmares are sometimes caused by your relatives. Nightmares are interesting because nightmares typically mean you're stuck in a situation that you don't want to be stuck in. You could be pursued by a bad thing. Like I said in an episode a long time ago, I used to have nightmares for, probably the first 7 years of my life. And I mean, almost every damn night I could remember. And it was a repetitive dream of being sort of tortured by this mannequin. And I would wake up in my bed covered in this big comforter, and there was a porcelain, I'm a child, so this is like a 4-year-old thinking up a dream. I was covered in this porcelain train, like just porcelain, like it could break if you move too fast, right? And this mannequin was one of those mannequins with the head cut off, and I guess it must have disturbed me as a kid or something. But it would yell at me in my mom's voice, telling me to get out of bed. And it was weird. This mannequin would slam her hand down. That was weird, slam the hand down on the bed and say, get out of bed right now. But if I moved, the porcelain thing would start to break, and then she'd start telling you, don't you dare break this train, or whatever the hell it is, right? So I let this thing torture me until I was about 7. And finally I said, fuck this, I'm not going to do this. And I finally threw the comforter on top of this mannequin, locking her in there. Then I booked. And I think is it the Wonder Woman chick? She Linda Blair, is that her name, or is that the Exorcist girl? I can't remember. I went to this bathroom that was attached to my room at the time of my dream. It wasn't real in real life, but I went in there, and Wonder Woman's sitting on the toilet lid, and she's sitting on the lid, and she's in this beautiful maroon robe. And I went from that crazy bitch out front to this, I was watching Wonder Woman as a kid, part of the rotation of shows at night. And I'm like, I have a total crush on her, and I'm sitting on her lap, and she's got this beautiful smile and big brunette hair. And no sooner do I sit on her lap that her head falls out of her hair. Her hair stays in place, and there's the neck right there. And I heard this horrible laugh. I remember thinking, but the weird thing was I still had defeated that thing, and I didn't have the dreams anymore for quite some time. But I used to also sleepwalk, which was kind of weird. But what I discovered through dreaming and having these pursuers, right? Because it used to be like, I think one of the dreams I had when I moved to a new town was I think maybe I saw King Kong or something. I had this big ape, which is, probably like 20, 30 feet tall, and it was just rampaging through the neighborhood, broad daylight, or maybe evening hours, and it was coming at me, and of course we're all running from it. But the reason why I sort of lost my fear of monsters and the whole gamut, and this is where I teach children to not fear monsters, is what I do is I say, well, what do you think the monster's going to do to you? Well, they're going to eat me. Really? How are they going to do that? They're going to start at my feet and move up. And when they start having the dream, I start saying, well, don't move and see what happens. I say, it's all a scare game. They can't actually get to you. They can't actually do anything to you because you're in your dream, and they can't touch you. You can't die, And I found out that as soon as I started having dreams, I had one recently where it was this house, and it was sort of like a really late summer night, and I couldn't get power in my home for some reason. A few nights ago, I had a dream where it was sort of this Evil Dead spirit that was in the house, and it was messing with me, and it was sort of trying to threaten me that it could change everything around me or something. It had this omnipotent power to terrorize me. And I just sat there in the dream, and I was like, all right, bring it on, baby. Like, let's go. And I just walked into the house, and I'm like, I am in the middle of your den of Satanism or whatever the hell you're all about. And I said, just bring it on. Do it. Because I have learned that nothing can touch you in these dreams. Oh, they'll get in your face. They'll freak you out. But it's only you making yourself freaked out that has any effect at all in the dream. Then a few days later, I had the same sort of setting, same place, and there was a little girl. And it was the old farm dress girl, with her little hair, and she's got it sort of like her face is always dark. No matter how she turned around, the light never lit her face. And she's there, and she wants something from me, like the little girl from The Ring, right? So the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, you're supposed to be scaring me. I get it. What can I do for you? And she just kept following me around trying to scare me. And I was like, it's almost funny at this point. What do you need? Do you need a sandwich? Do you need a glass of water so you can get back to bed? And it just diffuses the whole thing. But like I said in the previous episode, I can't remember which one it was. When I defeated that monster in my dream, I, in real life, no longer feared anything. Because you go to school, and if there's a kid bullying you, you're like, at least you got ahead. At least you don't sound like my mom. My mom and I got along fine. I don't know what the deal was. I think I just had a library of my mom's voice in my brain. So when I needed to have an authoritative figure yell at me in a dream, it just cannibalized her voice on top of this thing. So, it wasn't like she terrorized me or anything. Quite the opposite. Now, let's take it to another level. Why would we have to have dreams? This is the huge question. And I'll throw a few ideas at you, which are hopefully a little bit interesting. Now, when you're in your dream, there's a limited amount of bad things that can occur to you. And I know some of you have bad dreams on a routine basis, and this is probably not for you, but hopefully some of those techniques might help you kind of punch through the bad dream thing. Just go straight up to your enemy in those dreams and just feel like you're invincible, because you are. This is your dream. This is your mind. That you're in complete and utter control of that stuff. And I would say that if you believe me and you're having nightmares, I want you to feel like when you go to bed at night, you are the hero that has left the terrorizing world that was your dream, your nightmare cycle, and you're going to go off and you're going to get the boon, which is the technique to find out how to overcome this thing, right? Luke Skywalker went to Dagobah to learn how to be a Jedi Knight. What is it? The little lion from Lion King. I don't think it was Mustafa. Was that his uncle? Anyway, he goes off and goes into the jungle and finds, Hakuna Matata, and he comes back and he's able to conquer the evil of his uncle, that killed his father. You're the same way. Now I've told you, just try it. Just try standing up to anything that is messing with you. And when you go back to sleep, I want you to be drooling. Your fangs are drooling to tear this thing up. Because I guarantee you, it will back the fuck back. It will disappear. And once you conquer whatever's terrorizing you at night, when you come back into this real world, it will seem invincible. It will seem invincible. And encourage your kids, if they're having nightmares, to think the same way. Say, you know what the secret is? The secret is that you have the power. Just like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, you've always had the power to defeat this. This thing is only preying on your fear. But the second you stand up to it, you win instantaneously, We do need to loop back to sleep paralysis before this whole thing's over, but there's a couple of things that have occurred to me. And this is just me riffing in my own mind, years before I'm this recording. If you grew up in religion, then you have one paradigm of why you think you exist. As soon as you pull out of that and you contemplate something other than that, and even religion sort of has the same metaphor. Religion sort of says this is your prison, and you are pining to get back to heaven. Somehow you have this original sin, yada yada, and you're going to get back, right? All right. One of the other existential things is that if we lived forever, we'd have to renew into a limited life force, which would be our body, and have limited experiences, right? And then we go to the other side, we got a bunch of answers, hang out with some relatives, meet your favorite rock star, whatever, and then you come back down when you realize it's boring up there, because it would be boring no matter how you slice it, right? But think about your consciousness outside of your body. If you had your consciousness to yourself, what you really are, outside of your mortal coil, then what sort of reality would that be? It's not really bound by time, because time doesn't matter anymore, because you're no longer in a vessel that ages. You're no longer in a vessel with a time limit on it. So you don't fear death. You don't think about birth, and you don't fear death. You just are. And at some point, that's got to have a paradigm of experience you know? People think they're going to heaven. And it's interesting how, I was just talking to these Mormon kids the other day, and they said, well, we know that God is flesh and blood. It's like, why would you do that to God? Why would you do that to God in your own mind? Oh, because we know that he created us in his own image. Like, have you ever heard of a metaphor? You know, when I said to them, don't you think that's just love? Their eyes went absolutely deer. You know, there's a couple kids in the room that were like, oh yeah, metaphor. And this one lady said, well, I don't think it's metaphor. I don't think God works in metaphors. And I said, well, what do you think a parable is? Does Jesus Christ say that for you to understand the prodigal son story, you need to have two kids and you know to give all the inheritance to one and be loyal to the other? When the guy spends all of his money on tits and booze and comes back, you slaughter the beast and have a party? Is that what you're supposed to exactly do to understand the prodigal son story? Hell no. It's all metaphor of greed and forgiveness. You know? But again, these religions, they close your mind. They do not open your mind. They close everything off. Just like this idea that if somebody says you only REM sleep for a really short period of time and then it's all over, it's almost not worth thinking about anymore, right? Oh, well, okay. I guess there's only 10 minutes I have REM sleep, and inside that 10 minutes I have 12 hours worth of dreams or whatever. It's ridiculous. So we're going to open this conversation up because no one's having this conversation. I have never been at a bar and someone said, well, you know, have you ever thought about dreams? Doesn't happen. What do I get? Oh, I get philosophy on religion. I get philosophy on sports and yada, yada, yada. But never what we are forced to do every single night, which is sleep and sometimes dream, you know? But maybe, you know, and I try to figure out what would drive the cycle of a biological clock. One time I stayed up for a day and a half. You know, I was working really hard, and I just push, and I finally got to about, 38 hours, and I remember I finally decided I was going to go to sleep. It's about 6 o'clock in the evening on the next day. But I wanted to make an experiment out of it, you know, because I've always heard that sleep deprivation from torture, techniques of our intelligence agencies, they know that they can get a lot of weird stuff out of you. And I was reading a book at the time that said that once you stay up really, really late, or for a long period of time, your left brain goes to sleep because your left brain is taking care of all this myopic stuff, and your right brain eventually takes over. And there's been all these scientists and artists in the world that will force themselves to stay up 24 hours to access their right brain in a pure state. They said that they write better and they're more creative. And if you think about the thing I told you at the beginning of me being a kid and late at night when I had exhausted probably about 18 hours worth of consciousness, I would put my head down on my pillow and the whole world would open up to me. The whole universe opened up to me. And I thought, well, once I read this book, I thought, well, if that's a scientific reality, that these people have tracked the fact that they stay up really late and they have all these epiphanies, well, maybe all I was doing as a young man was opening up my right brain, which is then entirely like an LSD trip. LSD takes your brain and plugs it into the universe. That's what that drug does. It's not a swimming bunch of chemicals in your brain, all isolated in your brain. Your brain actually engages the entire universe when that occurs. And once you have that artery opened up by a single trip, you have to have your mind and your body and your whole soul in the right place. You don't want to go off on a trip if you've got a bunch of demons or skeletons in your mind, you know. But it might just be that fatigue is the thing that makes that happen. And when people are trying to lie to interrogators and they keep you up really, really late for days and days and days and don't let you go to sleep, it might be just that your left brain gives up trying to lie. And then your right brain's just like, whatever you need to know, dude. It's like you turn into the Big Lebowski and you just, hey, man, that's just your opinion, man. Well, here's what I know. Boom, 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 boom. Right? But what if dreaming is nothing more than returning back to a state of utter right brain freedom? That the reason why we dream is that the left brain goes to bed. And because we've been conditioned now with over 1,000 years of Prussian education, which is a left brain centric method of teaching kids everything about the universe. Every book you read has to be a Prussian charter. You know, it's to close the mind constantly. You know, don't worry about how the universe was created. It's a big bang, right? Don't worry about traveling through space and meeting another race or getting off this planet of repression, because you can't. Because you'd have to have light speed to really do it well, and that's it. Over and over and over. Everything is closed down inside your brain. Don't worry about who owns the universe. Read this book called the Bible, or the Quran, or the Torah. It's all figured out for you. You don't have to think. Everything closes you down. But when you go to sleep, it might be that your right brain is dominating. And the right brain doesn't really give a crap about all these other paradigms. The right brain is not interested in revenge. It's not like that. It's a hippie. It is an LSD tripping hippie, plugged into the universe of all knowledge. You don't just get it. It's not like you just go, hey, I'm checking out every book at the same time, and I'm going to read every word at the same second I get all that knowledge. Why would you want that? Let's explore. But when you close your eyes at night, you'll have the ability to see these things and live in these things and dream and explore these things. Now, I know that some of you, we've all done this. We've all had this happen to us. If you're of any age, you will see something in the middle of the day. You're watching a video of some car accident. You actually experience something live. That's really the two. Or someone tells you a story, and it freaks you out. And for a few days, you think about that situation. And I really think that is driven by an empathetic gene. People that have no empathy don't really care about the car wreck where everyone just vaporized into a bunch of blood. They don't care. I just saw it's really interesting. I'm going to go off and do this other left brain thing today. But the moment you have sympathy for the families that are injured and that the individuals that are hurting, you do carry that frequency with you. And it's almost as if you're dialing into the universe of empathy, which is why that frequency of that thought reoccurs to you, why you might have a nightmare thinking about it, because you're sort of unfinished with the thought. How do you resolve this situation in your head, Last Wednesday, I didn't know this, but an acquaintance of mine died in a car crash. And he was a retired Disney Imagineer and very successful guy. He and his wife are both Imagineers. She's still one to this day. And she's a sweetheart, and he was a sweetheart, and they were one of those mega couples, those super couples where you look at him and you're like, man, you guys just did everything correct, And we all got the news that he had passed away. And it was disturbing to me that he died in a car crash, and I don't know any of the details. And, the only detail I would love to hear is that it was somehow an instantaneous thing, of course, right? That he left this world painlessly. Not that it matters now. But that disturbed me for a few days. Because, one, I know his wife better than I know him, and she is just the biggest heart you'll ever meet. And I think about empathetically her going through this traumatic situation of they're both were in their late 40s. So they've got plenty of life left. She's getting to the point she was about to retire, I think, and then they were going to live their life. And they were living a great life anyway. They've been everywhere and done all this crazy, beautiful stuff. But of course you want them to have the full journey, not have anything cut that short. So my brain needed to resolve this. With a lack of information, I needed to find a way to resolve it in my brain. So for the next couple days, I didn't really dream at night about it. I kind of was preoccupied with it during the day. And it's still kind of weird to think about, And I, of course, I believe he's in a decent place, but that doesn't really stop the suffering of humans on this planet that know him and love him. And it's not just his wife, it's everybody, right? He's got kids. And, it's just one of those situations, right? But what if we don't have an understanding of dreaming and we start suffering from a traumatic situation? We start to dream about it and we don't know when it's going to be over. It's almost like when you catch a cold, you're like, damn it. The worst thing about getting sick of any kind is you don't know when you're going to be well. Is the flu going to take you out for a week? Is it going to take you out for a day? Is your cold going to roam around your throat for 2 or 3 months and go into your lungs? Or is it going to be gone in 2 days, right? Because we don't teach anything to our children about dreaming, this really has any concrete thought to it, we're sort of slaves to it. And as long as you're having good dreams, there's no problem. But the second you have maybe a reoccurring thought that's not the happiest thing in your mind, it can be a little crazy, Now, I used to have these things that I would call frustration dreams. And they were sort of waking up in an odd paradigm where I wasn't in my body. I was almost like a molecule. And there was sort of like a spatial anomaly thing where I wasn't myself. What I was seeing was not reality. It was more like I've become an atom, and I'm looking at other atoms moving around, and I was sort of trapped in this weird paradigm, and it went on for hours and hours and hours. And of course, I felt disoriented because what the hell am I? Why am I this thing? And that was the only time I had a set of dreams, and I don't have them anymore. I could tell when I was going to bed, I'd close my eyes and I'd see that world. I'm like, oh crap, it's going to come again. And my mom was pretty good to say, well, you're having a frustration dream. I said, what the hell's that? And she goes, well, it's just some weird loop that doesn't make any sense, and you're just going to have to try to make sense out of it. And once you make sense out of it and stop fearing it or whatever, it'll drift away. But the second you create this feedback loop in your mind that you don't want it to happen, and you're fearful that it's going to happen, you're acting as if you're kind of a serf to your dream. You're subservient to your dream. You're not in control. Then it gets to control you. But the second you just decide to make it yours, and how silly is it that you wouldn't own your own dream, right? Again, nightmares happen from time to time, but those are just unresolved images in your mind. And when you dial into the free-flowing information that is the universe, you're taking yourself down that path. And maybe you need to be going down that path for just a couple rounds, right? Maybe you just need to defeat that monster, whatever it is, you know? Now, there's this weird thing that happens in this house. It's the weirdest thing, man. There's and I don't know if it's a carbon monoxide thing or what it is, but there's this sleep paralysis thing that happens in my home here. And anytime I sleep someplace else, it never happens. But when I sleep here, every once in a while it happens. People have come to my house, have talked about having this. Maybe just a deprivation of oxygen, you know. Maybe it's something really going on. I don't know. Whitley Strieber would love this story. But you wake up in my house every once in a while, and you can't move. You're just paralyzed. And you'll get the sense that there's someone over you. And I have to say that I've had the experience of it being sort of your gray aliens, which is, I mean, believe me, I think that just sounds stupid. It sounds like me just taking a comic book page and putting it into my life, you know. But definitely some sort of being that is not trying to hurt me at all, even though it's disorienting and you can be frightened if you're not ready for it. I feel like now I'm so used to it. It's like, oh, you're back, whatever. But being constrained when you're a freedom lover is just instantaneously repulsive, and you try to fight back. It's almost like your cognitive mind's not coming in the room and going, oh, this is cool, you're here. What do you want? Let's talk. Teach me how to count in colors, right? But let's see. I'm trying to figure out the best way to tell you this story. I've definitely had I always sleep on the edge of my bed, you know, not hanging off the bed, but, you know, I don't sleep in the middle, I sleep on one side. And so even if no one's with me, I sleep on one side. It helps you get out in the morning, right? So the being is always on the other, just on that free side of the bed, you know, wherever that is. And I will feel like they're over me and kind of holding me down. But it's really, when I really realized what was going on, it wasn't anything holding me down. It was just I didn't have the communication with my autonomic system to get up. So I was in sleep paralysis, right? I got a friend of mine who actually suffers from a disease like this. Not quite narcolepsy, but just wakes up and can't move. And it's very disorienting for him. But there's another room in my bed, in my house, the master bedroom, where a couple other things happen that's a little bit beyond perhaps some sort of lack of oxygen. I know why I think that. I don't know why I think there may be some anomaly in the design of the house where the heater goes on. But this happens in the summertime as well, when you don't have the heater. So I don't know what the deal is. You know, my rooms are very, very different in terms of their heat. You know, one of my rooms stays really, really warm. One of mine just gets, or two of them get really, really cold because of the way they're up against the windows. But the master bedroom, people have had this experience, including myself. It's the weirdest damn thing where we feel like something is pushing on the bed. You won't even be asleep. You'll just be kind of in that twilight zone where you're laying down, you're trying to get to sleep, but you're maybe frustratingly awake. But I have felt, for me, it's always sort of towards my butt, where the mattress feels like it's going down. It's the weirdest thing. And other people have had it towards their head. And I'm not one of these guys that's like, oh, I live in a haunted house. Aren't I special? Quite the opposite. I've had people sleep in that master bedroom, and they're like, I woke up and there was I was in sleep paralysis, couldn't move, and I look at the end of the bed, and got this bumblebee. Here we go. And there's someone dark in front of me that's standing at the edge of the bed, looking over me, and they get the sense of being protected, not being threatened by any means, but still, because you can't move, it's alarming, right? Odd. That for me is like, well, we're all sort of near sleep when these things occur. And who knows, maybe that's a dream that someone was at the end of the bed. I wasn't there for that one, but I've had people in my house wake up screaming. And not screaming like a movie scream, but just like shouting for help because they've been stuck in the sleep paralysis and they want to be, they want to have someone else in the room to balance things out. Really strange. And so, I don't know what that is. I don't know what the hell that is. But again, in my house, we ask questions, right? Even if you're just coming to visit, we'll start having questions out here on the patio and get your mind opened up, and then you go to sleep, and maybe some more things occur to you that didn't occur to you before, you know? So my big question is the following. Why do we have to sleep? Why must we sleep? Why must our entire body just dial out, you know? When I did that thing where I was going to sleep after a lot of hours, and I started to study the whole process of going to sleep. I got off on another subject there earlier, but I felt my consciousness. I tried to feel the vector of my consciousness, meaning the direction of which it was traveling in relation to my body. And something occurred to me in the feeling of it, right? It wasn't like an idea. It was like I'm feeling the vector of where my consciousness is going. And what I felt was that my consciousness wanted to fall out of the back of my head. You know, and I mentioned in the time travel episode that I think that your brainstem would be the connection point of the conduit of your consciousness. And I forgot to mention that one of the most interesting things about how the brain's designed, because humans are so sure that everything's this bag of chemicals in our skull, right? Think about this. Think about a tiny, tiny insect that doesn't have any of the brain capacity that we have. They don't have a front or left lobe situation. They don't have a brain that remotely looks like ours, but they have complete consciousness to do what they do. You can freak out an ant just by stomping next to it on the ground. It's like, oh shit, and it starts running the other way. You haven't heard it. It's just freaked out. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's just instinct, man. They're just little robots, and they just do what they want. Yeah, okay. Well, we got the same thing, man. We can be feral, too. We just have iPhones to keep us sane, right? Some would argue that's not the case, but I want you to go research the brain of a giant squid or a giant octopus. And these are the ones that turn out to be 40 feet long. They're rarely ever seen, and they're rarely ever captured, but a few of them have been captured. There's some videos where they've captured them. Usually it's like a fishing boat that's not trying to catch them, but ends up catching one in a net, and then they sell it to a museum that checks them out. But it's a very interesting situation when they look at the brain of these creatures. If you've never seen one, and they have big giant eyes and giant beaks, and they seem to be massively intelligent, especially the little octopus, or I think it's an octopus that camouflages itself. It has a very textured body, and it's able to walk on two legs like it's actually some bipedal creature, which is really weird. It figured out how to walk on the bottom of the ocean when nothing in the ocean is like that. How is it emulating man walking when there's nothing down there that walks? Don't you think that's a little strange? I mean, you might say a crab walks or a lobster walks, but this thing is trying to be bipedal. It is bipedal. Why is it being bipedal? Ask yourself that. Go ahead, ask yourself. It camouflages all these different things. Okay, well, they open up the brain of this thing, and it's 40 feet long. You want to know how big its brain is? It's the size of my pinky. And what does it look like? Some of you have seen that novelty tube. you can buy at novelty stores, and it's a rubber tube that is turned inside out. It is essentially a tube that is sewn to itself, and you try to hold it in your hand, and because it's sewn to itself and it's full of this gelatin, it slips right through your hand and hits the ground. And it's the funniest thing is you pick it up and it just keeps falling out of your hand if you hold it a certain way. You can hold it like this and it won't fall out of your hand, but as soon as you try to grab it, it falls out of your hand. That is the shape of a squid brain, except it's about the size of my pinky. If it's 40 feet long, all right, or whatever, however long these things are, it's no bigger than my pinky. There is absolutely no gray matter. There's no white matter. There's no neurons that we can really sense. And some of the scientists believe now that the entire body of the squid is actually a giant brain, that they farm out all their neurons to the various portions of their body. But you can also sever a leg off of a squid, and I think a lot of them can grow it back, or an octopi. So we're so sure what we are, right? Kurzweil would have a hell of a time explaining how a squid is so utterly brilliant. And if you haven't seen these videos on the internet about how smart a squid is, and I used to have a buddy of mine who had one in the Bay Area, and he used to play with it all the time, and he kept it in a giant, 75-gallon fish tank. It was about the size of a small dog, I guess. Of course, they can scrunch up into the tiniest thing. But he reported this to me, and then I found videos of it on the internet where people videotape this occurring with a camera. A camera in the room while they're gone. Sorry. Of course, you're going to videotape something with a camera. Video record. We shouldn't say videotape anymore. There's no more tape in the world. Except at Christmas time. But these things will observe their universe, and they will figure out how to escape the tank. If you open the lid to feed them, and then close the lid and walk out the door and turn the doorknob and walk out the door and close the door behind you, they have recorded all of that. And there's squid escapes that are phenomenal. And there's some goofy, dumb ones where there'll be a ship deck. And ship decks have perforated holes along the floor to let all the water fall back, off the hull. And they crawl through these holes, and they think that's so brilliant because it's a big body, and they just push themselves through the hole. And they've got these beautiful techniques of yanking themselves through holes. And that's kind of smart. But when one of them escapes a fish tank, it is unreal how conscious these creatures are. You can still find this, I believe, out there, where a squid actually pushed the door open. This is what my buddy actually experienced at his home. Squids know how to open the door to the aquarium. They crawl out of the aquarium, crawl down the front of the aquarium to the ground, go over to the door, and then push their body up against the wall and grab that doorknob and turn it, open the door, and leave. I've seen at least one YouTube video, and my buddy had experienced this at least once, recording his fish, his octopus. That's not a dumb creature. That is a super brilliant creature with almost an infinitesimal amount of flesh, a vessel to be what they are. I know we're talking about dreams, but just think about it in terms of consciousness, right? I'm talking about intangible consciousness. And I think that a dream is your intangible consciousness, no longer bound, or maybe it's a portion of your soul, or whatever we are, our consciousness that is outside of the vessel. And when you go to sleep, you're essentially visiting your unbound form, almost like you're revisiting like a heaven. What if a heaven is nothing more than you being able to create whatever you want to see? Maybe floating in space isn't that interesting, so we don't dream about it, Dreams. It's a really weird thing. I made this episode to exhaust some of those ideas and some of those observations to you guys, but really, I just want to encourage the conversation. And I want to encourage you outside of indoctrinated booking about it, right? If you read a book about it, I want you to read the book in a way that is sort of, well, that's their idea. This is maybe even limited primitive man's take on what dream is when you read a book about it. Keep your mind open and realize that I think without a doubt, we have been gifted with all of the faculties and tools that we need to think up and realize and solve anything. And it's not special genetics, But let's get into some of the things that you might be ingesting in your diet that might shut off your dreams. You'll hear Kyle and I talk a lot about the pineal gland. The pineal gland is oddly very close to the brainstem. It's in the center part of your brain. It's a little bit higher than your brainstem. But it is called the third eye. And most Middle Eastern religions have completely identified this, at least your Hindus, as being your gateway to the universe. We believe, quite literally, that the introduction of fluoride to society, something that Adolf Hitler introduced to the Jews quite intentionally, fluoride accumulates in your pineal gland. And it's just nothing more than chemicals that have the same nuclear properties that gather, because that's what they are, and that's what crystals are. Crystals are atomic matter that likes its own bonding, is like has a native bonding relationship with itself, and so it stacks up and creates crystals. All right? Now, your body's very complicit. If you listen to my cancer episode, that's how cancer works. If there's a foreign body inside your body growing, the rest of your body is sort of subservient to that, and it goes, okay, fine, you want this space, it's all yours. And that's how you get cancer going throughout your organs, right? Whether it be a tumor or the sort of spidery kind that's really dangerous, right? Tumors are dangerous too. But fluoride in your system, which is really fluorine, it comes from making aluminum. And it happens in nature very sparingly. So if anyone tells you it happens in black tea and all this other kind of stuff, the parts per million is almost infinitesimal. And it's not nano-sized stuff, But it gets up in your pineal gland and it starts displacing your utter mechanism to join the rest of the universe. Now, you could brush your teeth every single day and have plenty of dreams. I certainly did when I brushed my teeth. But I find that some people are just absolutely shut off to dreaming. Now, the other thing is anything that gets in your brain cavity is going to disturb the function of your brain and potentially your pineal gland. When we talk about not drinking sugar substitutes, aspartame especially, you're talking about ingesting something that turns into formaldehyde in your brain instantaneously. It turns into methyl ester, which is rubbing alcohol in your brain cavity, right? Not good. These planes that are spraying things in the sky that don't go away. Well, when we scoop that stuff up, it's nano-sized aluminum oxide. Well, nano-sized aluminum oxide, if you ever breathe that stuff up into your nasal cavity at the apex of the curve in your nose, it can go right into your brain. Go see videos by Russell Blaylock. He's a retired neurosurgeon, sort of a smart guy. He's done all the science on fluoride. He's done all the science on aluminum oxide and a bunch of other stuff. Mercury. Mercury's another gigantic one. If you take flu shots or any type of shots, they want to push them into your kids to shut off their minds. They want to actually shut down society from dreaming. Once your pineal gland starts to atrophy, when it starts to shrink due to pollutants that are displacing it in your brain, literally displacing the cellular tissue in your mind, whether it be an infinitesimal amount or a lot, depending on how much you ingest, right? Remember, if they say you swallow a pea-sized amount of toothpaste, all right, they say pump your stomach. But you can drink a 12-ounce glass of tap water, has the same amount of fluoride in it if you live in a fluoridated district, and you will be ingesting the same amount, and there's no problem. Where they tell women, you should drink 8 glasses a day to lose weight. All right, so they're pummeling their brains with fluoride if they don't drink filtered water. Fluoride filtered water, not Brita, but a special fluoride filtered water. Smart water, as I understand it, has no fluoride in it because of the reverse osmosis technique that they filter it by, which is why I think it tastes amazing, right? What I always like to think of is, when you think about pollutants and dreaming especially, is that we were born a certain way, right? Now let's just take man. I had this helicopter coming over here. When you take man and you remove all of this unnatural stuff that we ingest, and you put us back to Mother Nature, I think you're going to find people that dream quite a bit, So if you don't dream, or you know someone that doesn't dream, take a look at either your diet or their diet. And if they want to dream, suggest that for a while they abstain from these things. And like I've said on the show before, when I got off of fluoride and aspartame, I have to say it was probably about 1.5 years before I really started to cognitively wake up and go, oh my Lord, my brain is moving so fast. I'm unequipped to dealing with the speed of it. And when I make these episodes, for instance, I don't plan these episodes, right? I just riff on the microphone, and I don't plan a lot of the epiphanies that I have during the show. So I might say something really cool to you guys and flip a script, of thinking, and you're like, ooh, I'm hoping that you guys listen to these episodes. You're like, man, you're changing the way I think, and it's opening up my mind, not closing my mind, right? That's the goal of Deep Thoughts entirely, is to open your mind to everything, right? But I'm going to tell you that I don't plan, because as soon as I dial in my consciousness to what I'm thinking about, my entire life story that relates to this subject starts to become almost a buffet in front of me. And so when I talk about things and I string things together in front of you in deep thoughts, I'm just riffing out of the universe. And I have to say that I think it's largely due to depolluting my mind, detoxifying my mind from a couple different substances. And it's really aspartame, which I used to drink tons of Diet Dr. Pepper. That was one of my favorite drinks, and I must have pounded that from at least 95 to 2005 constantly. It was my little secret weapon not to gain weight, which consequently I was gaining a pound a year permanently between 30 and 40. It wasn't working, which is what they always say. But the other one was get off of fluoride. But eventually I woke up and my brain was moving so quickly, it was almost like taking your car that's made with a factory engine, and sticking some crazy 800 horsepower engine in there. And your car is not made for an 800 pound horsepower or 800 horsepower engine. Its torque, its mass, its top speeds start going so fast you're ripping bumpers off the car. The paint's coming off, right? Handling the car is tough because it's always lurching to these amazing speeds really quickly. Where you put your foot on the gas pedal is no longer relevant because, halfway down you're going twice the amount of speed that you're normally used to. So you have to back everything off, and you need to rebuild the car around the engine to handle the new horsepower. And you're going to have to build it from the ground up. What I think is really weird is that we read stories about people like Isaac Newton, which, regardless if you believe what he came up with calculus, and that's regardless of Newtonian physics, when you shoot that down, calculus is calculus. He scooped out of the universe, the ability to create, calculate the area under a curve, if nothing else, right? That is a guy that didn't have fluoride in his system. He didn't have aspartame in his system. He didn't take flu shots. He didn't take any of this stuff, and he also didn't have medical coverage. Let's all rewind and talk about how we didn't have medical coverage. I was watching The Twilight Zone the other day, and a guy made a joke about he's getting so sick that he thinks he might have to get medical coverage, which is funny. Nobody had medical coverage back in the day. You called a doctor, they came to your house, you gave him money, that was it. Once we told doctors you can have Ferraris and Lamborghinis if you just happen to charge a lot of money, well, that's exactly what happened, right? Because dreams are so powerful and so profound to who you are as a person relative to you, right? I think we need to protect having them. I think we need to protect interpreting them. I think we need to open our mind and start having the discussion with people around us about them. Because, if you get to the end of this part of the video, I want you to go after this video within the next 24 hours of your life, if possible, right? And just bring up the subject of dreams to someone that you believe is intellectually equipped to at least bounce back and forth a couple times. And I want you to look at their eyes. Look at their eyes when you ask them what they really think dreams are. And look at how empty they are in most cases. Now, if you find someone who's really put a lot of thought into it, you're a lucky person. I've got brilliant friends of mine who are the most incredible film people, design people, writing people. Like I said, one of my buddies won't even talk about it. Strange. One of my other friends who's lived a lot of life, I asked him and he goes, oh, it's just so that you can file away your memories during the day. Never thinking of how ridiculous that whole mechanism is, right? As long as you're conscious for 10 minutes, whatever happened to you 10 minutes ago is going into your long-term memory. That's just how it works. You don't have to go to sleep to file away memories. That's someone just making up a ridiculous, closed-minded theory. How would they possibly prove that with an EKG? Oh, we're watching little metabolized memories go back from front to back, front to back. It's not happening. They're just making that up. Just like they make up everything when scientists who usually lack a lot of right brain creativity, they bottom out on their theories, and so they create literally like a dartboard theory. The Big Bang is a dartboard theory, and its creator tried to back out of it. Hawking, right? The Big Bang. I'm just going to say it again because I mentioned in the last episode time travel, and I forgot. I said it didn't happen, but I forgot to give you the one smoking gun. The Big Bang theory is based on a singularity, right? All the mass of the universe coming down into a single infinitely small dot. The number one reason why it didn't happen is that dot of nothingness, right, would be an infinitely packed, most uniform object, meaning if you did give it some mass in your brain, which you have to, and you cut it in half, right, the left half is going to be exactly like the right half, and you cut it down the middle, the top half is going to be exactly like the bottom half. So if it were to explode, it would be a uniform explosion if there ever was a uniform explosion, meaning equal force in all directions. Now, the stuff that would scatter from that explosion would also be in a unified pattern. When you look out into the stars today, when you look at your hand, when you look at the fact that you look different than me, none of that would be possible in a uniform explosion. In fact, life itself would not be possible. You need randomness in order to create life. Like Stephen Wolfram did a whole book on this thing, where he said that you need pretty much the randomness between 3 and 4 particles being random, and then you get life. Anything over that, you get a pattern. Anything below that, you get a pattern, which is not life. It's maybe a crystal, but it's not life. So that's one reason why that didn't occur. And once you start divorcing yourself from these scientific methods that say this is exactly how the universe started, dreaming becomes a lot more interesting for me. Daydreaming is the bomb. Daydreaming is priming yourself, I think, for a better dream, because you're massaging the faculties in your mind, the mechanisms in your mind, your consciousness, which are two different things, right? I think your mind is the biological matter that actually connects with your consciousness, or your brain, I should say. I always call the brain the mind, but your brain has to have its level of electrical density to capture more contact points with your consciousness. And that's going to severely increase the way that you dream. And your pineal gland is the grand central station of that relationship. And so we have to take care of our pineal glands. Don't let anything get in there and mess it up. Your brain cavity should be the most coveted thing in the world. Again, if I said drink Drano, you wouldn't do it. But if I say drink this thing that is Drano, but its effective Drano is 20 years out, 30 years out. Well, you're like, okay, well, it tastes delicious. I guess I'm just going to drink this thing. Don't do it. Don't eat crap. Don't drink crap, right? Alcohol, for one, it thins out your blood and it knocks down the amount of neural connectors in your mind. Be careful binging on this stuff. Don't get drunk as an adult. Experiment with it when you're a kid, but try not to do it when you get older. It also thins out your blood and thins out your arteries, thus thinning out the substrate that is what you can be. We need to protect this vessel, because I'm relying on you guys to take us to the next level of consciousness. I'm just a crazy guy on the internet trying to throw you ideas to poke and prod your consciousness, right? I know you feel me. Won't go any further. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. That's about it. So, as I always say, take care of yourself and somebody else, and we'll see you in the next episode. Over and out.